Good morning once again. Thank you for joining me for another one of our discussion video sessions. Today we'll be talking about the research project which I undertook, and that being the Salem Witchcraft Trials. I decided to look at that from various perspectives. I wanted to make sure that people understood the ongoings of the actual investigation and how that played out. One of the important things to understand is that although witchcraft per se did in fact occur. One of the things that was important is to realize that Tituba herself was a first generation immigrant to from the West Indies. And as a result, of course, we know she was a slave. But what she was doing, in fact, was she was practicing her pagan religion. When eventually, when the girls Abigail and Betty become involved with her in the forest and speaking in these different tongues, what in fact was happening was she was teaching them her ways and the ways that she had been taught previously due to her culture. But what becomes more interesting is how the initial group of girls that were accused eventually led to a greater investigation, which was led by Increase and Gotten Mather. And as a result, you're going to see more people who are going to be accused of being witches. Now, one of the things that makes it very interesting is how they are brought together. Okay, these people in the initial group of defendants were not related in any shape, way, or means to the ones that eventually were later on accused of being witches. I think one of the issues that really lends into play is that the women that had been accused later on by these ministers were women who had been very well off economically, and as a result of being well off economically, they were living outside the scope of the patriarchal system. That's important because during that time period, women are not allowed to exist outside of that particular system. The ministers, and of course, handed down would provide the authority to the fathers, to the men, who in fact then made all decisions based on whether it's economics, social issues, and any other political actions that may be taken. But these women were wealthy women, Sarah Osborne, Sarah Good. So as a result, what ends up happening is this creates friction within the patriarchal system. So the Salem Witchcraft Trials, what it really does is it allows the ministers to come in and utilize this well, not heretical, but pagan ritual or pagan religion to become the catalyst to really put down this, if you want to call it an early form of feminist movement. It's not a movement per se, but rather it is these women who are living outside, once again, we're outside the realm of, outside the scope of these ministers, or really outside of religion per se. So what happens is in this, we have a small theocratic institution here being led by, of course, Protestant ministers, and this was a way of bringing pretty much everyone back into the fold. So the research itself was based on looking at this patriarchal system, the societal aspects of it, also taking into consideration the girls who were involved in the accusations, and which makes it interesting because we always tend to look at them merely as victims, but even though they were victims and were victimized, they were still considered to be culpable. And as a result of that, of course, were going to be punished. But the Salem Witchcraft Trials, absent of any uncanny and supernatural events, really what it did was it was more of a social push against women who at this point in time were going to be, you know, uh, somewhat, if not really, freed from familial and patriarchal restraints that had been placed upon them. So this is what makes the research very interesting. Once you strip away the supernatural and you look at it, it really gives us insight to one of the earliest forms of social upheaval. And with that, I hope you find this video very interesting, so that you may be able to do some research on the actual topic, and hopefully you find the same results I did through the course of this particular class. Thank you and have a wonderful day.